Welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. Today, we're going to talk about how by you being a guest on other people's podcasts, you can raise money, you can raise awareness, you can build your network, never dry out of leads. I'm excited about today's guest. He is an expert in this space. Before I go there, let me remind you of a couple of things. Number one, inside of the Think Bigger Real Estate group on Facebook, we continue the conversation. We go deeper on these topics. So be sure and join us there. Second, starting May 10th, depending upon when you're hearing this, I'm doing a 5-day challenge teaching people how to grow a large referral business without having to just rely upon their sphere, past clients, friends, family. So really exciting things. I'm excited to have you be a part of that. Go to gobiggerwithreferrals.com to sign up for that challenge. So back to today's guest. His name is Trevor Oldham. He is the CEO and founder of Podcasting U. And it's the foremost podcasting booking expert when it comes to helping you get on other people's podcasts. So Trevor, what a brilliant idea. I'm obviously a big fan of podcasts.
Yep.
And I'm excited to have a service like you bringing great guests to the table. So appreciate you taking some time today to be on the show.
Thank you, Justin. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to providing some value for your audience.
I love it. I love it. Let's dive right in. Obviously, probably for some that are listening right now, they've enjoyed podcasts. They've listened to podcasts. They're probably thinking to themselves, wait, me, a guest on a podcast? I know, I'm just a listener. Help us change that paradigm. Why should those who have interest in growing a brand, in growing a bigger business, in even raising money for their investments, why should they start to consider being a guest on a podcast?
I find that being a guest on a podcast, when you're trying to go out there and grow a personal brand, to be one of the easier ways. When you think about it, if you wanted to go out there, you wanted to build a social media following, well, you have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, say even LinkedIn and YouTube. And that takes a lot of work to reach a large audience. It could take months to get a couple thousand followers, where by doing one podcast interview, you could reach hundreds or thousands of listeners. And I find that, you spend 30 to 45 minutes on a podcast interview, you're able to reach this new audience. And it's really relatively not that much work, where if you're creating content, you have to schedule the posts out, you have to write the captions, you have to get them ready, all that fun stuff that goes into creating a personal brand via social media. Or by going on a podcast, it just doesn't take as much time. And I find that they're a lot more enjoyable than me sitting down on my phone, taking having a photo, writing, a caption, a couple of paragraphs, where like Justin and I, we're just talking today, we're having a nice chat. And I find it to be, at least for myself, a lot more enjoyable. And I find that once people get over that sort of initial fear of never being on a podcast and jumping on their first show, they're like, why haven't I been doing this all along?
It's interesting. Some of my mentors, they talk about other people's money, obviously in the investor space. Like there's no question that that's a great way to be an investor. Another one has taught me about the power of other people's stages, right? People like myself has spent years and years to build a platform to reach an audience. And what I hear you saying, Trevor, is rather than, or maybe in addition to going out and building your own, why don't you just be highlighted, take your expertise, bring that to somebody else's stage, reach their audience, serve their people, as opposed to just trying to build your own.
Exactly. When you think about it, when you're trying to go out there and to start your own podcast, people don't realize that it's more than just interviewing the guests that you're having on your show. Or if you're doing solo episodes, you still got to prepare for it. You got to make sure you know what you're talking about. You got to actually do the interview or record the solo episode. And then once it's done, you got to edit it nice and professional. You have to put it, get it ready to go out there on iTunes, Spotify, and all Google Play and all those good places. And then you probably want to write a blog post or a show notes and stick it on your website where people can get links to the episode. And that's a lot of work, where all you have to do as a guest is just show up on the podcast interview, talk to the host for, again, 30 to 45 minutes. And the host is going to do all that work. 9 times out of 10, they're going to create social media assets for you that you can use to go out there and promote the interview that you've done with the host on your social media. So you don't have to create your own social media posts. That sort of negates the issue of spending any time there. So when it comes to sort of the time commitment, it's really a lot less by going on other people's podcasts and starting up your own and really going all about it. I find that just the time, and the time, since the time is more valuable going on other people's podcasts.
It's interesting. You just reminded me of all the work that goes into each and every one of these episodes. And it's been really fun as I've been asked to be on other people's podcasts. it does feel like I'm cheating a little bit. Like I just show up and turn my camera on and answer questions, and you kind of take it
Mhm.
from there. And then, a week or so, you send me this beautiful package thing that I just share on my social media. Like it almost seems not fair, right? But I know, having been a podcast host, always looking for the best knowledge, right? The best
Mhm.
network, the best people that I can put in front of my audience. When people come to me, it's actually a value add, right? It's actually
Mhm.
much easier to have qualified, good people like yourself who raise their hand and say, "Hey, I can serve your audience, I believe. Would you be willing to
Mhm.
have me on your show?" Right? That's, as much as that may seem self-serving, you're actually helping us, the hosts, right? When you
Yeah.
do that. So it's a
Yep.
great point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think the way that I always see, like, whether it's myself going on shows or our clients going on shows, it's always just to provide as much value as possible. You're not going on there and giving a sales pitch for your service. There's always a time and place during the interview where I'm sure, Justin, you give me an opportunity typically at the end of the show to say, where can our audience find more about our product or service? And that's where you get the promotion. But
Yeah.
it's more or less just providing value to that host's audience. And then in return, that's how the potential listeners can come to you and to use your product or service if they are interested in learning more about it, or just learning a little bit more about yourself.
Now, we also want to talk about this other side of it. Why is everybody not a fit to be on a podcast? Let's talk about that a little bit, because we've kind of
Mhm.
parlayed it like, hey, this is for you. If you're listening, this is for you. It might not be for you. Help us understand how, like, what people would not be a good fit to be on a podcast.
Yeah, I've had this come up specifically in our business because I've had calls with clients, and I can tell right away when I'm looking before I even have a call with them based on the information that they've sent over that they're just not ready yet to go on these podcasts. And the reason I say that is you typically want to be experienced in your business. Now, I'm not saying you have to be, you know, you don't have to be closing all these deals and having all these, making all this money, or if you're a real estate investor, having all these units under contract, but you don't want to be going out there as a new agent or a new investor and going on other people's podcasts because you typically don't know exactly what you're going to be talking about. It's probably not going to flow properly. Or I find that if I speak with a client and they're not that experienced, I don't want to waste the host time and I don't want to waste the client's time by putting them on a show if they're not going to see any value out of it. And it's typically not going to make for a good interview. And that's what I tell people is that sometimes you can be a little too inexperienced when it comes to podcasting, especially the hosts are getting typically pitched on a daily, if not weekly basis. And you have to make yourself stand out against the other clients that they're getting pitched. And that can be difficult to do if you jump the gun too early. And it's also, we've had people that are experienced, but they've never done an interview before, and they want to go on the biggest show in the space. Well, that might sound good, but if you've never been on an interview before, you're not going to sure how the mic's set up, how the lighting's going to go, what questions are going to be asked, and you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and you don't want to go on this large show in your space and really just mess it up. Where, there's tons of podcasts out there. You could go on one that's a little bit newer, say it's been around 1 to 3 months. It's a lot easier to get accepted as a guest. You can sort of practice, talking to the host. You get a little bit more comfortable for it, and then you can jump to those larger shows over time.
I was trying to figure out why Joe Rogan wasn't getting back to me. It's all
Yeah.
making sense now. All right, let's talk about KPIs, right? There's this concept
Mhm.
of, like, every time, in fact, one of the things I help real estate agents do is to recognize and remember the value of their time, right?
Mhm.
And it becomes important with every activity to be able to compare what the marketplace would pay me for this time compared to what my ideal dollar per hour is. And so this concept of KPIs, right? Key performance
Mhm.
indicators. How do people know if spending time on a podcast is actually worth their time, is actually consistent with their dollar per hour, right? Like the amount of
Mhm.
income that they want to be producing for them and for their teammates.
The best way to go about that is for every interview that you do, you want to set up a landing page or have some sort of lead magnet set up prior to you going on the interview. Because you could go on an interview and you could have a great interview, and at the end, you're going to send the listener's audience to just your homepage or your website. Well, if you do that, you're not going to be able to, if you have website visitors coming in every day, it's not going to make a lot of sense because you're not going to be able to target the traffic. And I found that specifically in the podcasting space, you want to set up a landing page for each interview that you do, or have one specific landing page that you can track on the day that your interview goes live. And by doing that, you can say, okay, my interview with Justin went live this morning. Let me check the landing page at the end of the day. Oh, I got 30 people click to it, and I got 10 new people added to my email subscriber list. And then I can go on my email subscriber list. I can see, the 10 names of those people. And then I can think about, let's say a month down the road, one of them schedules a discovery call with our company and they end up becoming a client. And you really just want to be sure that you're tracking it, because you're going to have no idea where the leads are coming in from podcasts. And sometimes you might do an interview with a podcast and you get no leads. It's just going to happen from time to time. But let's say you do an interview with a podcast and you got 10 leads from it for your business. Well, you probably want to go on that podcast again sometime in the near future, whether that's 6 months or 12 months down the road, because it's been a great lead source for yourself. But you would never know that if you didn't have any KPIs or ways to track your success. So I always find that when it comes to podcasting, you always want to track your success, again, just by setting up these landing pages or by having a specific lead magnet to send that audience to.
I love it. Very intentional and very specific to each show, right? Which if you've created one landing page, right? If you have like a WordPress site, for example, right? Or a ClickFunnels site, you could easily just go duplicate that site, give it another subdomain, and you're off and running, right? For those that are wondering how to do that, and maybe that's not your thing, talk to your tech person. Very much not a complicated thing to do right there to be able to track that. So I agree. If you're actually going to take this serious, if you're actually going to start getting into the game of being on other people's podcasts, you better start tracking your numbers. Make sure that it's actually worth your time, and or that the podcasts that you're on are worth your time, right?
Exactly.
Let's talk about the three things. I know you're adamant about not just telling people to be on them, right, if they're a proper fit, but also that there's kind of certain etiquette that you shouldn't show up on a show and do certain things. What are maybe three things that you would say you should not do when being a guest on someone else's podcast?
I think one, being in a noisy space. Back a long time ago, I used to have my own podcast back in 2015, ran it for about 2 years, and something I've had to talk to our guests or our clients from time to time is make sure that you're in a nice, quiet space. Because I've seen clients take a call and take an interview in a car, take an interview around, and it's just not a good thing. So make sure that you're in a nice, quiet space. Two, make sure that you have a microphone. No one wants to be on listening to an iPhone conversation on a call unless that host is set up properly and can have, the sound quality is going to be good. Make sure that you get a proper mic. The setup isn't going to be that much. You can go on Amazon. You can get I think it's a Blue Snowball. You can get a Yeti microphone, Audio Technica, going to run you about $50 to $100. They're going to be good quality microphones, well worth the investment. And then I find the third thing is making sure that when you're on these interviews that you're sharing stories, that you're sharing value. You're not just going on there to benefit yourself. It's the host show. They're having you on as a guest. They're spending time out of their day to interview you for their audience. They're taking all of the work of the interview and editing it and putting it out there and all the things that we had discussed earlier. The last thing you want to do is ruin it for the host and have them say, "Oh, wow, that person was a terrible guest." That's not what you want to go for. So just to remind yourself that you're there to provide value to the audience, to the person's audience, because I think we've all listened to an interview where it was all about the guest and what they've done and how they're gonna help that audience, and it's just over salesy and too pitchy. And I just find that people don't like to listen to that. So just again, the more value that you can provide on the interview, the better off it's going to be in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. You're a guest in someone else's house, right? You're a guest at somebody else's party, and for you to dominate and take over and talk about yourself the whole time, you probably won't get invited back to that party, and the guests probably won't appreciate it. It's actually self-defeating, right? Although you think you're getting ahead by being heavy self-promotion the whole time, people feel that, right? And people want to follow those from whom they've gotten value, not from whom they've been pitched necessarily. So great points. I love it. Let's talk about this preparation. I think some here in the audience right now are probably thinking to themselves man, I should totally do this. I'm in a spot now where I have something to offer. I get the etiquette portion of it. I could totally dedicate a certain amount of time each week to being on other people's stages, right? Being on other people's podcast platforms. What's the best way for people to prepare to be on other people's podcasts?
I find the best way to prepare is, first and foremost, think about who is your target audience? Who are you looking to speak to? There's, I think, over 1 million podcasts out there in the world. And you may think, oh, I'm a business owner, I want to go on business podcasts. And even within that space, there's probably about 100,000 podcasts that are out there in the business space. So you really want to figure out first and foremost, who's the target audience? Who are you looking to speak to? And that's going to help you prepare sort of who you want to go out there and who you want to talk to. Like example, for myself, I'm a business owner. I've gone on entrepreneur podcasts, gone on personal finance podcasts, but I found my bread and butter is talking to people in the real estate space. So that's been my focus audience for pretty much the last year and a half. So I make all my messaging around that one specific audience. Where if you're a business owner, are you an online business owner? Are you a brick and mortar business owner? Whatever it may be. So you want to figure out who your target audience is first and foremost. And then when it comes to preparing yourself for the interview, we've talked out etiquette about getting a mic. And when it comes to getting yourself on these shows, you want to create a professional pitch and you want to create a professional one sheet. And with these two items, it's going to allow you to stand out amongst other guests that are trying to get on that show as well. Because a lot of the times hosts, they'll look at what's called a one sheet. And if you've never heard of it before, it's similar to, I say, like a media kit. It's almost like the resume that you got perhaps when you were in school, but it's for your professional accomplishments that you have now. And hosts typically are going to pull that up when you're on your interview. So you want to make sure that you have it down. You just want to make it as easy as possible for the host when they have you on as a guest. Make it as easy as possible for them to have the interview with you, because the last thing they want to do is have you on as a guest and have to go digging for all this sort of information for your bio, for questions to ask you, and all that sort of good things. You just want to make it as easy as possible for them. And then when it goes to going on the show, I always recommend listening to an episode before you hop on, making sure that you have the show name down, making sure that you know how to pronounce the host name if you don't know how to pronounce it. Just all those little things that are going to allow you to make you feel comfortable. And they don't take a lot of time. It spends, 20, 30 minutes of your time preparing for your interview. It's going to make it go a lot better than if you just hop right on. You don't even know the host name. You don't even know the show name. It's just not going to be a good time.
Final question here. Actually, second to last question. Great tips, by the way. Let's say a real estate agent is not interested in necessarily raising capital for investments. I know that's one great reason. Let's say that you're just looking to add leads, like just to kind of grow awareness and generate leads for their business. Have you seen that work before?
I have. And the way that it works is basically one of two things. One, being a real estate agent, you can go out there and you can go on, other real estate agent shows all across the United States. That may not be a big fit for you, but we find real estate agents will take the interview that they've done, or even that the interview is across the entire US, so that's our main focus. You put that interview on your website, and potential clients that are looking to sell or buy a home, they check on the media page on your site, and it gives you a little bit more credibility. But there are also podcasts specifically in your location. So I'm in Massachusetts, so there's not a huge amount, but there's a decent amount, 20 to 30 podcasts that are specific to Massachusetts owned businesses. There might be 20 or 30 where I can go on, and it's a lot easier to go on because there's definitely not as many guests trying to get on these specifically, local area podcasts. And then just by hopping on those, and then again, you're able to reach an even bigger, bigger audience that you typically wouldn't be able to. Might be a little smaller than the going after the entire US. But then it's going to give you more credibility. People are going to hear you. And we find that allows, specifically real estate agents to get a little bit more leads in their business is by going on these podcasts in their local market.
Very interesting strategy, right? As opposed to going for the Joe Rogans, the local podcast, right? Love it. Great idea. Trevor, it's been a total pleasure to have you on. I want to move now to the signature question of the show. You're a big thinker. You're somebody who has really scaled up a business that helps people leverage these platforms. What does a guy like you do to continue to be a big thinker? What do you do to continue to personally grow yourself?
I think to really personally grow myself is always just constantly learning, always reading new books, listening to podcasts, just taking the ideas that people share on those books and those podcasts, and then just trying to implement them in my business. And I'm the type of person where if I hear a new idea, I'll go out and try to implement it in my business right away and see what the results are going to be. I don't want to wait around. I don't want to wait till tomorrow. I just want to go out there, put myself in the fire and see if it works, and see if it works. If it's great, if it doesn't, then I just don't do that business aspect anymore. So it's really just constantly learning through reading books, podcasts, and then implementing what they have talked about from people that are more successful for me, trying to implement those same ideas into my business, and then just seeing what works and what doesn't.
I love it. Always a learner. Folks, I want to thank Trevor, for joining us here today. It's been super insightful. How do people learn more about you? How do people find you? If they're like, this makes a lot of sense. I enjoy the interview process. I'd love to be on shows. seems a little overwhelming, the whole one sheet idea. How do people, I know you've put something together to really
Mhm.
kind of help people gain expertise and proficiency in getting this up and going. Can you direct people to where they would find that?
Yes, most certainly. You can go to it's podcasting you, so that's our website, podcastingyou.com/masterclass. And recorded a free 20-minute masterclass that you can view. I walk you through everything you need to know on how to find shows, how to create a pitch, how to create a one sheet, how to reach out to the hosts, and all that good information. So if anyone's interested in getting booked on podcasts, feel free to go to podcastingyou.com/masterclass, and then I'll give you all the information you need.
I love it. Trevor, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for your time today and for your expertise and really for creating a service that allows people to leverage these platforms that us podcast hosts work so hard to create. So, and really helping us match up with the right people. So, appreciate your time. And for everybody listening today, whether you're listening live or whether you're listening after the fact, my request are these 3 simple words, and they are go think bigger. Trevor, appreciate you very much, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.